Hello everyone, welcome back to online class. I am Akkamahadevi from Akka Public School, Kalabudi. So today I am here to re-explain the chapter, that is bones, joints and muscles. So already we have learned about this lesson, right? So today just we will recapitulate all the contents which are there in this lesson. Okay. So as you all know that human skeleton is a framework of bones, right? So human skeleton is a framework of bones which protects all our internal organs, right? So what the human skeleton protects? Our internal organs, right? So do you remember like how many bones are present in adult humans? Yes, exactly. 206 bones are present in adult humans. So what do you think, like the bones which are present in the humans are of same size and same shape? No. The bones which are present in our body are of different shape, different size, and even they perform different functions. Okay. So all the bones, they perform different functions. Like some bones are long, some bones are short, some are flat, and some are irregular. So all the bones which are present in our body are not same. Okay, they are different in size also, and even in shape also, and even they perform different functions. Okay, so here the ordered structure of bones is called a skeleton, right? So do you get like you got an idea about skeleton? Okay, so now let us discuss in detail about this. Okay. So as I said, like human skeleton means ordered structure of bones. Okay. So first we will discuss about skull. Okay. So what do we call for skull? Yes. Let me tell you. It is also called as brain box, right? So why it is called as brain box? Because it protects our brain, right? So skull is also called as brain box as it protects our brain. Okay. So the front part of our skull is made up of 14 facial bones, and the upper part is made up of 8 flat bones. Okay, so here the front part of our skull, like they are made up of 40 facial bones, and the upper part is made up of 8 flat bones. Okay, so what these bones, they are interlocked. Okay, so they are not movable, right? So in the whole part of the skull, only the movable bone is in the lower jaw. Okay, we can see the movable bone only in the lower jaw, not in the upper jaw, right? So that only we can talk, we can eat, right? We can open our mouth, right? Because of this bone which is present in the lower jaw. That is a movable jaw. Okay, this is about skull. So once again, let me repeat, like skull is also called as brain box as it protects our brain. Okay, so now we will move forward and we will discuss about backbone. Okay, so now we will discuss about backbone or vertebral column or spine. Okay, so where do we find this backbone? Right? So from the top of the neck to the head. Okay, so where do we find this backbone? From the neck to the head. Okay, So this backbone, it consists of many small bones, right? It consists of many small bones called vertebrae. Okay. So it consists of many small bones called vertebrae. So there are, like, it is made up of, as I said, like many small bones which are called as vertebrae, and there are 33 vertebrae. Among them, few are fused, and now we count them as 26. Okay. So where do we find backbone? As I said, like from neck to the hip, and it is made up of many small bones called vertebrae, and it consists of 33 vertebrae. Among them, few are fused, and now we count them as 26. Okay, this is about backbone or vertebral column or spine. So now next one is, yes, rib cage. So the next one is rib cage. So as we all know that there are 12 pairs of ribs, right? How many pairs of ribs? There are 12 pairs of ribs which connects from the front part of the chest bone to the back side, that is the backbone. Okay. So once again I will repeat you, like rib cage. It is made up, like there are 12 pairs of ribs which connects from chest bone to the backbone, and it forms like a cage which we call as a rib cage. Okay, it forms like a cage for which we call rib cage. Okay, so now what do you think, like rib cage protects, what it protects? Important internal organs, right? Which are those? Let me tell you. It protects our heart and lungs. Okay, so rib cage protect our heart and lungs from the injuries. Okay, so this is about rib cage. As I said, like there are 12 pairs of ribs which are connected from chest bone to the backbone, and these rib cage, it protects our internal organs like heart and lungs, right? This is about rib cage. Very easy topic, right? So next one is, yes, so the next one is the limbs. Okay, so what do you mean by limbs? Arms and legs are known as limbs. Okay, so arms and legs are known as limbs. Okay, so the bones of our arms are attached to the shoulder, right? The bones of arms are attached to the shoulder, right? And the bones of legs are attached to the, yes, hip. Okay, so the bones of the arms are attached to the shoulder, and the bones of the legs are attached to the hip. Okay. So, do you know like how many bones are present in each limb? Yes. Let me tell you. So, there are 30 bones in each limbs. So, total overall how many bones are there? 120 bones. Okay. So, in each limb there are 20, each limb there are 30 bones. Okay. So, overall how many bones are present in the limbs? There are 120 bones present in our limbs. Okay. So, do you know that which is the longest bone and which is the shortest, like smallest bone? Let me tell you. Okay. So, here longest bone is present in our leg, that is thigh bone. Okay. So, the longest bone which is present in our leg is thigh bone, and smallest bone which is present in our ear, that is sternum. Okay, so the longest bone is thigh bone and the smallest bone is sternum. Okay, so this is about limbs. Okay, so now we will move forward. This is not steply, I think this is stepes, right? Sorry, thigh bone and this is stepes, S-T-A-P-E-S. Okay, so this is about the longest bone and the smallest, like shortest bone which are present in our body. Okay. Okay. This is about the limbs. So now we have learnt about skull. We have learnt about backbone. We have learnt about rib cage, and even we have learnt about limbs. Right. So now we will move forward and we will discuss about joints. Okay. So as you all know that, what are joints? Yes. So a place where two bones meet. Okay. So where the two bones are going to meet, so that place is called as joint. Okay. So what do you mean by joint? A place where two bones meet are called as joints. So now let us see the types of joints. Okay. So how many types of joints are there? Yes. Types of joints. Okay. So here there are two types: immovable or fixed joint. Okay. And another one is movable joint. Okay. So one is immovable or fixed joint and the another one is movable joint. So there are two types of joints. So now can you tell me where this immovable, that is fixed joint, is present? Yes, where this fixed joint is present? Yes, in the skull. Okay, so that is the facial bones and the brain bones. They are fixed bones. They are not movable. Okay, so now when we talk about movable joints, so there are ball and socket joint. Okay, so these are movable joints, ball and socket joint, hinge joint, pivot joint. Okay, and the fourth one is gliding joint. Okay, so these are all movable joints. Which are those? Ball and socket joint, hinge joint, pivot joint, and gliding joint. So now, where do we find all these joints? Yes. So where do we find this ball and socket joint? Exactly, in the shoulder and in the head. Okay, so where do we find this ball and socket joint? In shoulder and in the head. And where do we find this hinge joint? Yes, knees and elbow. So where do we find this hinge joint? They are found in knees and elbows. And what about pivot joint? Where do we find? Yes, skull. That is the first vertebrae bone. We find pivot joint there. Okay. And what about this gliding joint? Where do we find this? Yes, in the ankle and in the wrist. Okay. So where do we find this gliding joint? In the ankle and in the wrist. So now let us discuss one by one in detail, like what is ball and socket joint, what is hinge joint, what is pivot joint, and what is gliding joint. Okay. So first is ball and socket joint. So as we all know that ball and socket joint are present in shoulder and hip. Okay. So these types of joints, how they help us? Yes, they help for like to move our hands. Like we can rotate a hand completely, right? So how it is possible? Because of the ball and socket joint. Okay, so here what happens? The ball of the hand, so think the ball hand, the ball of the, this is the ball, and the ball of the hand will be attached to the socket. So the socket will be like this, like a cap. Okay, so the ball of the hand is attached to the socket of the shoulder, from which it can move, it can rotate freely, right? So it is possible to rotate freely, it allows to move freely, right? So that only see while bowling above we can rotate a hand completely, and even while skipping also we can completely rotate our hand. This is only possible because of this ball and socket joint, which allows movement in all direction. Okay, so ball and socket joints, where do we find? As I said, like they are found in shoulder and hip. Okay, so next is hinge joint. Okay, so hinge joint, they are present in knees and elbows, and this type of joint, they allows movement only in one direction. For example, you can see I can move my hand only in one direction. I cannot bend this hand backward because hinge will not allow to move in a backward direction. It allows only in one direction. You can see, for example, doors of your home, like we can open and we can close it. We cannot move it forward, like, isn't it? So like that only the hinges which are present in our knees and elbows, they helps to move only in one direction. Okay, so hinge joint allows movement only in one direction, and they are present in our knees and elbows. Okay, this is about hinge joint. So now next joint is pivot joint. Okay, so here what happens, skull moves on the top of the first vertebrae, right? So our skull will move on the first part of the vertebrae, which is known as atlas. Okay, so what this pivot joint helps, it helps to move our head upward, down, and even we can see to our sideways also, but we cannot turn, like we cannot move backward. Except backward, we can move our head upward, down, and even we can see right, even we can see to our left also, and even we can rotate also, right? So this is possible because of the pivot joint, which is present in the like in the skull, like the first part of the vertebrae. Okay, so this is our pivot joint. So now next joint is gliding joint. Okay, so a gliding joint allows smooth and easy movement, isn't it? We can easily like turn our wrist and even ankle also, right? We can turn our wrist or ankle, even we can bend also very easily. This is because of gliding joint, right? So even you know the tissue that join muscle to muscle, the muscle to bone is called, do you remember what we call the tissue which joins muscle to bone? Exactly, we call tendon. And the tissue that joins bone to bone is called ligament, right? So here the tissue which joins muscle to bone is called tendon and bone to bone is called ligament. Okay, so this is about types of joints. So now we will move forward and we will discuss about uses of skeleton. Okay. Uses of skeleton. So as you all know that it protects all the delicate internal organs, right? Skeleton protects all the delicate internal organs. It helps us to walk, right? It gives support and shape to our body. It is a storehouse of calcium and phosphorus, right? So bone marrow of long bones help in making blood cells, right? So these are the uses of skeletons, right? So here we discussed about bones and even we discussed about joints of skeleton, right? So there are some additional parts of the skeleton which are not as hard as bones, but we can bend easily. What we call for that? Yes, some additional part of the skeleton that are not as hard as bone and which can be bent. Exactly, they are called as cartilages. So now where do we find these cartilages? Yes, so these cartilages are found in ears, right? They are also found in the nose tip of the nose, and even they are found in the joints of the body. Okay, so these cartilages are found in the ears and in the nose tip, and even we find them in the joints of the body. Okay, this is about cartilages. So now we will move forward and we will discuss about muscles, right? Okay, so what do you mean by muscles here? So major portion of our body is made up of muscles, right? So here what happens, like, do you know like how many muscles are present in our body? Exactly. 639 muscles are present in our body, right? So how these muscles help us and what are the types of muscles? Let us see, right? So here are the types of muscles. So here are the types of muscles. They are voluntary muscles or skeletal muscles. Voluntary muscles or skeletal muscles. Involuntary muscles. Okay. So the types of muscles are voluntary muscles and involuntary muscles. So voluntary muscles are also called as skeletal muscles, and these involuntary muscles are again divided as cardiac muscle and smooth muscle. Okay, so here types of muscles, there are two, that is voluntary muscles, or even it is also called as skeletal muscles, and the another one is involuntary muscles, and again they are divided like cardiac muscles and smooth muscles. So now what do you mean by this? Voluntary muscles. Okay, so these are those muscles that are under our control. So these types of muscles will be under our control. So these muscles are connected to the bones, right? So whereas the involuntary muscles, like here, they are not connected. But here, these muscles are connected to the bones, and here they are not connected to the bones, right? So they work in pair, like one muscle in the pair contract while the other release to produce movement. So how they work? They work in pair, right? So they work in pair. How? If one contracts, the other will relax. So like this, they takes movement to move a bone, right? So where do we find these types of muscles then? Yes, exactly. We find these types of muscles in arms, legs, right? We find in arms, we find in legs, neck, shoulder, tongue, eye. See, these are all which are under our control, right? If we want to walk, we will walk. If we want to stand, we stand. We can control. So these muscles will be under our control, right? So the muscles involved, like voluntary muscles or the skeletal muscles, are those muscles that are under our control, and these muscles are connected to the bones. And where do we find these muscles? Yes, we find these muscles in arms, legs, neck, shoulder, tongue, eye, etc. Okay, so when do we use? Like while writing, while walking, while running, we use these voluntary muscles, right? So what about this involuntary muscles? Yes, so we will talk about cardiac muscle, right? So where do we find this cardiac muscle? Exactly, these type of muscles are found in the heart. Right? Where do we find cardiac muscles? So these type of muscle are found in the heart. So they are involuntary and keep on pumping blood throughout the body. They need rest. They take rest? No. They will work continuously, right? So these muscles work throughout our lifetime without getting tired. So when we sleep, whether our habits also stops to be, whether it also takes rest? No. It will work continuously, right? So what about the smooth muscles? So these muscles are also not under our control. As I said, like involuntary muscles, they are not under our control, right? So these muscles are not in our control. They work on their own. So these muscles are even not attached to the bones. They are not connected to the bones. Whereas voluntary muscles are connected to the bones, but the involuntary muscles are not connected to the bones. Okay, so now where do we find these type of muscles? Where do we find smooth muscles, right? So these types of muscles are found in internal organs such as mouth. Okay, so we find in mouth, stomach, intestine, and even in lungs also. We find these smooth muscles, right? Which are not under our control. They work there by their own, right? So this is all about types of muscles, that is voluntary muscles or skeletal muscles and involuntary muscles. Okay, so this is all about bones, joints and muscles. So once quick, we will recapitulate the contents which we learned, right? So first we learned about bones, right? So next we have learned about joints, types of joints, which are those ball and socket joint, hinge joint, pivot joint, and the one more, gliding joint. Okay, and even we have learned about muscles and types of muscles like voluntary muscles and the one more, involuntary muscles. Okay, so this is about bones, joints and muscles. Okay, so even you got the notes of this lesson also, right? So I hope you all enjoyed this class and even you all have understood this class, right? Thank you.